Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with the columnist, our major columnist in the Carolina Call, Mr. Howard Wesley, who I've had a long association with over the years. And we have not only lived but written about Black history. My name is Paul Jervay. I currently publish the Carolina Call, and I am a former publisher of the Carolinian. And we hope today we can share some vital information with you regarding the necessity for African Americans to be aware of their culture. I have been in forums and meetings, one meeting in particular, where a noted African American made the observation in a mixed group that the black man has no culture. We'd like to discuss that for just a few moments with you uh, this afternoon. What's your opinion in that regard, Mr. Wesley?
Well, Paul, I think it's an asinine question. The reason is all you have to do is look at the Bible, the first paragraph, uh, Genesis 1 through 10. And in the beginning, it says what? Everything was dark. Uh, Life itself came out of darkness. And that if it wasn't for life, if it wasn't for the dark, there wouldn't even be any need for the light. So
Exactly right.
therefore, if God Almighty decided that He's dealing with a human experiment, and He chose us as the main as the centerpiece, he surely He knew what He was doing.
He did
And
indeed.
then when you look at the Bible said everything came out of darkness. And you want to look at every mineral that you can think of. Coal is what? Black. If you want to look at any time that it gets dark outside, you know something's getting ready to happen. If you take children, two black individuals, jet black individuals, can produce a white child. You haven't seen any two white people ever have a black baby.
Correct.
So, and we can go on and on and on and on and on with a myriad of examples to show who's who and what's what in regards to this black race, you see. And the thing of it is that when you look at this world today, and as messed up as it is, the whole world is looking for you, the African, to come out with something new because it's about to fall apart.
And I think you make a very good point there because if we look back in our history, as far as various personages are concerned in our culture, uh, their contributions to where we are, even in America present time, if we go back to the Clinton administration, there was a gentleman by the name of Brown in that administration that was the author of Balancing the Budget, something that we've never even ventured toward in present time. But yet and still, we, the populace, the African American populace and communities, are called on to have certain fiscal responsibility. The long run of that is the nation needs to have a fiscal responsibility, and African American authored that back in the Clinton administration, and we've gotten away from that. And then as we move back in time, the many accomplishments as far as our African American culture is concerned, from the African continent across the waters to America, how we came out of slavery, how we learned how to read, how we learned how to adapt in another entire country, shows the ingenuity and the creativeness and the culture of a people. And as we fast forward today and find ourselves in a curious political arena, there's so many things to try to discount the very valuable intellect of the African American into the strata of things. it almost makes you want to scream because go ahead, Mr. Wesley.
What you were bringing to mind is that in the 50s and 60s, we had what it was called the first Negro syndrome, the first Negro mayor. This country was falling apart. Newark, New Jersey, Indiana. What was that black town in Indiana?
Gary, Indiana.
Gary, Indiana, and so on and so forth. These cities were falling apart, big by big, deteriorating. And what they do, they got this black individuals, these black mayors to come in, and they saved them. I mean, literally saved them. Look at New Jersey. Now it's falling right back because they took it back after a certain point in time. But you look at Newark and you look at Los Angeles, look at San Francisco today. I mean, you got homeless folks all down the street with defecating in the streets. This is the great United States of America, you know? And you're talking about culture and who also superiority. Listen, how is it that this man had us in slavery for how long? Without pay? Now, anybody knows if you're running a business, you don't have to pay your labor.
Exactly.
You should be rich. But they had us there for how many years? At least 30.
Hundreds of years.
Exactly. Without pay. And look at them today. Broke as ever. And not only the United States of America, look at Spain, look at France, look at all of them. You know? And I'll give another little thing. Russia. There's a guy named Alexander Pushkin. Russia wouldn't have a language today if it wasn't for that black boy.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So if you want to talk about culture and who's got what, I mean, it's no context. I mean, sorry. You know, next question.
Yeah.
What did those Joe Crockett just say, Chuck Sewell? Bring your next case.
Bring your next case. That was what Chuck Sewell used to say, who was a two-fisted proponent of the Constitution. And even in talking about the Constitution, one thing that I have found through the years is that we have to constantly re-up the Voting Rights Act.
That's
why is that indigenous only to African Americans out of all of the melting pot that we purport that has made America great? Why is that not a fact of legalized life in America as far as your most prestigious privilege is concerned, and that is to vote? Why do you think, Mr. Wesley, that we are singled out as a people in that regard in America?
Paul, that's very simple. Let's go back to the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln came out with this. The first thing. It was a unilateral decision to incorporate black folks into the family of white folks.
Right.
We were slaves. We came here as slaves. And we didn't come here on the Mayflower, by no means. We came here in the hull of a ship, chained together, and in each other's feces, for instance, all the way across the Atlantic. Now, when they got to the point that slavery was productive as an economic tool, they decided to free us, and had that war. But you see, then they turned around and decided that we were African Americans. Why was that? They didn't want to pay you reparations. You came here as a Negro. Now all of a sudden, you didn't give them any permission to change your nationality, your country, and they did it themselves, a unilateral decision. And then I was talking to Jesse Helms about this one time. Jesse Helms said, "Well, of course you couldn't vote." Well, but you make my point, So again, and now that you got to be African American, look at you today. You're worse off today than you was when you were in chains. you know, and you got the African Americans, not Negroes now. This is intellectual, doctor prone. And that's another thing. I'm sorry to be, but how have we got so many doctors and not one of them produces a job? They themselves looking for jobs, you know, and haven't produced not one with all of our degrees and all of our, you know.
And that is a good point. And Marcus Garvey made a point some years ago, and he had this particular quote I like to read, and that is, political power rules
Mm-hmm.
in a democracy only as the group seeking its exercise is economically independent of the group it seeks to affect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Negro in America has no industrial foundation independent of the white majority, which can therefore control him politically, preventing his effective use of what balance of power he might normally hope to exercise as between the majority parties. So basically, what we're living in, as far as African Americans are concerned in America, we're living in a borrowed culture. We have our culture as Africans coming to America, and the culture that we live in America is in fact a borrowed culture. So I think the point that Mr. Garvey makes as far as the need for the African American on this side of the water to develop economic independence, to have political power, is putting the cart in the right place before the horse.
Thank you, Paul, because he
Not Paul, Marcus. Marcus said that.
right, but you see, let's see, who was Garvey's primary enemy? Du Bois. Du Bois decided that Marcus Garvey must go, and they set up the whole, you know, the college, black colleges in the United States of America. Most of all of them are hooked into the Greeks fraternities, Skull and Bones. They had their whole modus operandi was to stop Garvey, stop what you're talking about.
Right.
You know, and you find that. Look at our colleges today. Our mothers and fathers scrubbed these floors and did everything humanly possible to send us to college, you know, to get a degree. And look at us. We are nowhere near, we don't know what a nation is. We don't have no idea of what it takes to become independent. And as a matter of fact, I would challenge you to get the average PhD and ask them when the last time you had an independent thought. You know? And again, that was Du Bois doing. And talking to talented 10th. You know? We talking here about the one percenters, you know, that got all the wealth. But Du Bois, and that wasn't his idea. That came from Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, as a matter of fact. Check it out. Mm-hmm. Rockefeller wasn't talking about the talented 10th. And Du Bois just, what they call it, pleasurized.
That's exactly what he did. And moreover from that, you talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, there's also the other side of the coin with Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. And this is what I think that we need to embrace today as African Americans. We do not need to fragment ourselves. One of our biggest drawbacks is lack of unity. If we could somehow marry the concept of academics to the concept of the trade world, if we could marry academians to trade people that are all black or that are all Africans, then we could move in the direction of economic independence. So often we find ourselves, even as a race, being polarized because I have a degree I does.
I do.
But over here, on the other hand, there are viable careers in bricklaying, plumbing, printing, carpentry, you name it. And let's not fragment ourselves, but let's look at our overall wherewithal as a people and pull it together. It takes all of us to make an effective culture in this part of the world that we live in currently, which is called the United States of America.
To prove your point, Paul, in 1918, I'm sorry, the Universal Negro Improvement Association developed the Constitution of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Now, the operative word in the name is improvement. Negro improvement.
Yes.
All right. Now we had, and then African Communities League was a business component of the overall organization. But my point is that in 1918, the Universal Negro Improvement Association developed and registered a constitution that said every black individual in this world, as long as you're of African descent, you are a member. Then that's a thing about dues, and say a thing about other requirements, other than you had to have your union card, if you know what I mean. You know,
Absolutely.
So and that means that we have got today at least 1.2 billion folks in an organization that is centered around race first. That means you got a global market ready for you, and all you have to do is come together and embrace what the Du Bois and others were trying to divert you from. And we ought to have enough brain power to economics, cultural, you name it. Listen. Black folks is in every capital in the world. They know every language in the world. They know how the economic system works. But we don't have one of our own. But a simple reason that I don't know you.
That's right.
I've been working with you all these years. I don't know you, sir. Other words.
Well, we have worked with one another all these years.
No, I understand.
we've got a very good knowledge of one another.
Okay, Mr. Jervay.
But I understand your overall point, Mr. Wesley, that it is essential to us as African Americans to communicate with each other.
Exactly.
And in this particular age that we live in, we have a golden opportunity to become an independently economic cohesive unit, especially in this day of social media. We have the technological means to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. Mm-hmm. And the point that you allude to, the wealth of knowledge that we have developed over all of these years, if we could somehow pull that together in a central networking or think tank mechanism to apply it for a common good, I think we could access another era as far as African Americans are concerned, with your key point, globally, because the world is no longer a national world. It's a global world. Everything that you do sitting over here on this side of the Atlantic is impacted by what's going on in a global world. And we have to begin to think with that kind of dynamic as a people if we are looking forward to having the kind of future that we need to have.
Well, I of course I agree with everything you said, but I would just add that it appears to me that when you look at the situation in the West, the African, not the African Union, the European Union is falling apart. And you can forget about AU. If the EU was controlled by the CIA, what is the African Union doing? And they were saying that one time that the African Union is going to take over the whole political strata of Africa. But the fact of the matter is, well, I'm sort of stepping on my own foot. Well, my point is this: is that the world, in terms of the Western world, is about to fall apart. The dollar is under attack.
That's true.
And there'll be a resetting of the financial system. That is an excellent time for Africans to look at each other and say, "Hey, man, we can do this thing, and we got every tool we need, and we can come together as a unit." Our Constitution that the Garvey and company put together made it so that if you have African descent, we're together, and then the food you eat, it's not that much different than what the brothers on the continent is eating. The Caribbean, the same thing, you go up here to some kind of Caribbean restaurants, and they got oxtails, they got this, that, and you find even just smacking the lips, across the globe. We're talking about 1.2 billion folks all smacking the lips over oxtails. And you mean tell me we cannot figure out a way to produce oxtails for?
Exactly right.
So I mean, and the oxtails are just one of the. We talking about fufu. We talking about a whole gamut of things. And then when you look at, all right, I'm gonna give another example, my brother. Food in Africa, every 8 trees out of 10 is something you can eat. In the United States of America, there's only 2 things you can eat out of every tree that you come across. I mean, 10, they got oak trees, acorns, and all these various trees out here, and don't produce a thing you can eat. But in Africa, or put it this way, there's another sad example of truth.
Mm-hmm.
You could go on a trip in Africa. Don't need to take a bag. No, I mean, this was some time ago. Don't take a luncheon bag. Just, put on your glad rags and go, all right? And if you get hungry, walking down the street, there's a banana tree leaning over the highway. Pull yourself one and eat and go. And not only that, as I said before, a variety of things. And just enjoy yourself. And then a white man came to Africa and said, "What are you niggas, doing? You can't be giving this stuff away. You got to sell it." And some of our illustrious brothers said, you got a point there. And it got so now that if you're in the village, you got to buy a banana and you can't afford it. When it was walking down the highway and just picking it.
Right.
And I mean, and not only that, sad thing about it. Take bananas. You go to the grocery store and you get a banana yay long. In Africa, they got little scrumpy looking things because they take the best bananas and send it to Europe, United States, but in Africa itself, in the village, they got these little scrawny looking, like when you got potatoes or something, what do you call them things? Anyway, about the size of your finger, and this is you. I mean, they was yours, and you can't afford it. The same thing. Same thing with coffee, cocoa. It's sad, but we are so smart. And don't tell me my brothers are not smart. Just ask them. They will tell you.
Well, I think, Mr. Wesley, we are at the place in our history where we will be wise not to outsmart ourselves.
Very good point.
And
excellent point.
I would like to, we're going to have to wind up at this point. So I'd like to say at this time, I'd like to thank the Carolinian for allowing us to have this discussion.
Very good.
And
excellent.
I am very fortunate in that I interact with this brother on an ongoing basis. But let me say to all of you that you have a culture as African Americans. That culture stemmed from Africa. And embrace that 365 days of the year. African American history is history that needs to be embraced, that needs to be learned from, that needs to be applied for all people to have a better life. Thank you so much.
Could I get 1 minute?
One closing point.
When you talk about the black woman, now it's a fact that if it wasn't for the black woman, the black man would have died a long time ago. We're not going to go into that.
That's true.
But she, in her infinite glory and beauty, if just in order to check this out, check your what do they call them thing, the computer, and look for something called the Eve gene, and it will show to you that there is a gene that is only produced in the woman, the female,
Right.
that is produced first and foremost in the black woman. Every individual that is born black, blue, green with his purple stripe down his back got this gene. She is the only one that's got it, man. Now, this had to do with survival.
It does.
You see, and I'm not talking about Adam and Eve, no, I'm talking about, it has to do with making it in this world, surviving. And you look at you as the black woman from time immemorial. But she has got the Eve gene. And I would challenge anyone who's listening to this, check it out in terms of who she is and what she represents. Thank you.
Thank you for that footnote to our discussion.
Thank you, gentlemen.